Today we're going to be looking at this passage again in Isaiah 58 and looking at our vision. This is hopefully starting to become familiar to people a bit more. It's the start of the year. It's the sort of thing we've been doing last year or so, where Isaiah 58, we've heard this passage a few times now. And it's just a bit really to remind ourselves a bit about what our vision is and where we're going with it, and to allow God to speak to us through this passage again and again. And so that's what we're doing this morning. And our vision for the church, just to remind you of what it is, I mean, you see it on the poster over there and it's on the screen, is a Christian community with a heart for God, seeking God, serving others, shining brightly. That is what we felt we were called to be striving for, called to be as a church, to be our sort of identity. When people see St. Michael's, they see us as a church which is seeking God, serving others and shining brightly. We've had it for about 18 months now, and it's probably still a long way to go with this, but it's our vision. It's what we're called to do, called to be, and it's and I find it very helpful, especially with the Bible passage Isaiah 58 that sits behind it. I find it really helpful as a way to sort of think about church, what we're trying to be, what we're trying to do, especially when things maybe feel a bit more difficult. To have this as a nice reminder of actually, God has a plan for us, he has a purpose for us, and this is what we need to reach into if we're trying to strive towards that purpose of God. And just sort of mention a few bits over this last year, as a way of encouraging us, and then we'll go a bit more into what's coming ahead and the Bible passage as well. But over the year, there's been lots of things which have continued as church, things like mainly music, the drop-in lunches, various other little groups that use the building. We've got the craft group. We have a group which isn't actually part of our church. They hire it, called Widows Oil, which is supporting widows, breast friends from the co-op people. Some people run that there for us. They hire it out as well. But there are things which bless the community. We've more recently been doing craft packs with the preschool families, where each month they're getting a craft to do. And we've had really good feedback from families who have found it really helpful, really positive, and it's helped build relationships there. We've been over Christmas hampers, which many of you generously donated towards, which went to some of the more needy preschool families. And the feedback we've had from that has been really positive from those families, with a couple saying about how it's going to transform their Christmas, just being able to have those hampers. So they've been a real blessing to others in our community and the preschool. And one of the things that sort of felt like it's been happening, certainly towards the end of the year, is actually our links in the community seem to have been improving and getting better. For example, Kerry and myself have been invited into Gig Mill a couple of times to go and speak to the children at the school there about Christianity and Christmas, and they've already booked themselves in for Easter to come up to the church, to visit church and to learn about the Easter story. And so it just feels like suddenly there's a bit more of an open door with the school there, and they've been advertising some of our bits through their newsletter as well. So that's been encouraging. I'm finding myself having more conversations with people outside of church. Certainly, suddenly the staff at Co-op, and maybe they've just realised I'm the vicar after so long, I don't know, but suddenly I'm having conversations with them most times when I go into Co-op. And so it feels like there's a bit of movement and openness in our community, which has been encouraging. And there's lots of other little things that are going on in the background, some more less exciting things, such as getting policies sorted in the church, got a new fire alarm system, which has been a thing hanging over us for a while in the church over the last year. You may wonder how they fit into this vision, but actually having sort of the governance that's sort of solidified, having the fire alarm sort of in place, the safety done, it allows us to live this out. It allows us to be able to do this well, to do it safely, to do it knowing what's right, what's wrong, and all of this. Actually, they're very important things and help us. And so, in terms of a year, it may, in some ways, have felt like a fairly static year, but it's been lots of things going on, lots of things happening. We've had new people join church, we've had baptisms in the church. It's been a good year in many ways, and mainly through work that God has been doing, more so than, I guess, any think that we ourselves have sort of pioneered things which we've been running for years, have been going well, we've been working, we've been meeting with families, new conversations have been opening up through those ministries and more. So we should be encouraged, I think, as a church in that sense. God is at work and he is honouring what we have been doing, honouring the things we are going to do. And so I hope actually that start as a starting point, as an encouragement for us as a church. And a lot of those things really fit into the sort of middle category of serving others. That's what we've been doing probably well as a church. What's been maybe a bit less, it's a bit unfair to say it's a bit less, but in terms of where things are obvious, it's a bit less on the seeking God front. And I said this time last year on the shining brightly front, I think that's the fruit of seeking God and serving others is to shine brightly. So we have been shining brightly, but it's a bit more difficult to pinpoint the exact moments in terms of separation of serving others and shining brightly. And sort of looking ahead, part of my thinking is about the seeking God front, looking at more about discipleship, looking at being more intentional faith-wise. We do these great things of serving others, and actually it's good to serve others without sort of an ulterior motive, in the sense of actually we want to bless you because we love you, not we want to bless you because we want you to do X, Y, Z for us. And so it's good that we have that attitude and heart of actually let's just love people. But actually there is a part of seeking God, one for ourselves where we seek God, but also in our own discipleship is actually we speak about Jesus naturally. That's part, if we're seeking God, it will overflow out of us into our conversations. And so on to look kind of ahead into sort of more intentional faith activities, more intentional discipleship. And discipleship as well is not just something that is done just to us. Discipleship is about teaching about Jesus, learning about Jesus. So actually discipleship is not just an inward activity, but it is an outward activity as well. Because if you're teaching about Jesus, talking about Jesus, then that's an act of discipleship. Whether people are disciples, that's another matter, because being a disciple is being a follower of Jesus who is undertaken to learn about him, to receive his teaching and to follow them. But discipleship itself, if we're doing discipleship, it's actually us talking about Jesus. And so that's sort of the thing we're going to start looking at through this year, is how we do things sort of a bit more intentionally. And we've got a couple of things, sort of ideas in the pipeline. They're not fully set yet, but looking at some sort of men's ministries, women's ministries, which are outreach focused in the sense of some of it will be about socials, but in doing so it's about offering opportunity for people. If they want to learn a bit more about Jesus, find out a bit more, we'll say, actually we've got this coming up in next month. If you'd like to come along, come and join us. And it's that sort of thing. And with this idea as well of, say, discipleship, seeking God focus, we've actually bought a pack of Bibles. We've got, I think it's 40 we've bought currently, NIV Bibles, which are purely for giving away to people. So if you ever come across anyone who is maybe interested in faith or hasn't got a Bible and would like a Bible just in your own sort of natural conversations, then actually come and speak to me. We've got all these Bibles which are they are purely for giving away. That's their purpose. So don't feel like, oh, can we give them away? Yes, we can. That's what they are for. They're brand new Bibles. I think they're currently, I think they might be in the office, either in the office here or in my office at home. But anyway, speak to me and we can do those Bibles. And the idea is, we think the Bible is this precious gift from God in the sense of it speaks to us, it's his word, it tells us all about Jesus, it's got all that's necessary for our salvation, it's spoken about in the scriptures. Then we should want people to be able to read the scriptures, be able to give it away, to encourage them. And so we have them, and there are various other things we're going to be exploring, nothing kind of set in stone yet, but we're going to start doing these little things to sort of hopefully be seeking God, be more faith intentional as we move forward. And one of the other things with all of this is about actually, and I mentioned this I think start of last year, and sort of we paused things a little bit, but was about being a bit less sort of project focused, in the sense of it felt like, at least to me in my sort of prayers and reflections, that we'd become sort of dependent upon the project. We were trusting that projects were going to be what saves St Michael's in Norton, and kind of forgetting that actually that job is God's job, and we follow him where he's calling us to be. It may be he calls us to do a big project, and that's a wonderful thing, but actually that may not be his calling for us. And so it's about being where God is calling us to be as a church. And with that, sort of what I felt over this year, as I've been sort of reflecting and praying on this, is a lot more about smaller and more organic activities, rather than thinking what's the next big thing we can do. It's like, actually, where is God providing us opportunity at this moment? Actually, one of the great opportunities we're seeing at the moment has been through the preschool, with preschool families engaging and having some of these little conversations which seem to be happening. There seems to be more openness with the families of preschool at the moment. And so we're wanting to take some of that opportunity there, which is why we've been doing some of the things we've been doing, why this talk of men's and women's ministry has come up. And we're going to see maybe where that goes. We don't know exactly where it's going to go. Same with Gig Mill. That's an opportunity. They've approached us to come and speak to them. It's not been the other way around. So let's see where does that relationship go? What's that going to develop? And again, even like with the Bibles to give away, it's one-to-one activity, generally speaking, rather than thinking we're going to host this big event, hundreds of people are going to come in, and hopefully one or two people might react. Actually, one-to-one, if like 10 of us had one-to-one conversation, that's 10 Bibles that could go quite quickly from just a small one-to-one activity. And I feel like that's what God's calling us towards. And some of that, it's not intentionally pragmatic, but there is some pragmatism in there when you think about it, in the sense of some of our capacities as a church is actually becoming a bit less. The idea of maybe having another big project is a bit like, well, who's going to do it? Is going to be a question we ask. People are already doing a lot. The question is who's ready to take it on. And actually doing smaller things is much more within our abilities of where we are as a church currently. And actually I think it could be something much more fruitful. And I just wanted to share that all with you to start, just to get you maybe a bit more encouraged about where we've been, maybe give you a little bit of idea where we're going, understanding behind what's going on in my head around sort of vision and direction of church. So I'm going to now just move into sort of looking at our passage a bit more on the Bible behind it. And one of the things that really, and this is a big part of our vision is much less about sort of the activities that we do, but it's much more about the culture of who we are as church. It's much more about culture. Are we a people who are seeking God, serving others and shining brightly, rather than saying we're going to do X, Y, Z, this is what we're doing, that's where we're going to go, and not worry about sort of ourselves, where our hearts are, where we are in our own well-being. It's much more culture-based. And there's a well-known saying, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's a big sort of business phrase, and sometimes it's used around vision. And sort of part of the idea of this is actually, if you've got the wrong culture, then actually anything that you plan is going to fall. And that's very true in church life. And it's very true as we read Isaiah 58. They may have been doing all of their religious activities. We're told they were fasting and they were eager for God to come near them. But actually their culture was completely against the way of God. They were fighting with one another. They were exploiting people, striking each other with wicked fists. They were doing all of this. Their culture was wrong. And so actually what God called his people to be, it meant they couldn't quite get there because their culture was wrong. And that's true in church as well. We can have great visions, great ideas, great plans, great understanding of God's purpose for the church. And yet our culture could completely misalign with that. And we're never going to quite get there because our culture leads us away from God rather than towards him. But it also happens in some ways the other way as well, where you can have the strategies. It may not be the best strategy, but if your culture is right and your culture is good, then actually that is much more important than what your strategy is. And that's also true when they're speaking about it in business as well, but we're thinking specifically about church. If we get our culture right as church, if people of Israel got their culture right back in Isaiah, actually, the whole sort of strategies would have been much less important. If their culture was right, then in some ways, the fact they were ticking all their religious boxes would have been less important, because they would have been living out the way God had called them to live. Their culture would have been serving others. It would have been seeking God truly. It would have been not fighting with one another, but building one another up. And if they were being built up in faith, the fruit of that would have been tremendous. And they could have lived out their purpose as Israel, to bless themselves, but also to be blessing the nations of the world, because their culture is right. And so it's a really significant part of church. It's really significant in our passage. It's this idea of culture. And in Christianity, we often use the word holiness. And that, in some ways, sums up what Christian culture should be. It's a culture of holiness. We are to be holy because our God is holy. That was also the words to Israel as well. But what happens when we say the word holiness is we have a very specific idea of what holiness means. So often it's steeped in sort of British history, British tradition of holiness as well. And the idea of holiness we get is the idea of something very solemn, something very serious. When we think of what is a holy church, and I've seen this debate online recently, which is where I'm bringing this bit from, is often when people think of holy church, they're thinking of traditional church. A traditional church, maybe, which still looks like the Victorian era. They still wear all their robes. They may have incense spraying around. They have all their candles lit. We've got our candles lit, which is good. But all the candles lit, very quiet. Everyone sat still in their rows. They only stand up when they're meant to stand up. They say all their liturgy very well, and then they go home afterwards. Now, I'm not being critical of traditional church. I'm just saying that is the picture when we say holiness. That's the idea of what people think holiness is. If I say holiness, I very much doubt you're thinking a church which is full of noise, a church where there's lots of movement going on, where people are moving around, some people arriving late, some people leaving early. All of this, the noise of children going on around you, the noise of people trying to get to their seats, whatever it may be. You may not be thinking that's a holy church. And yet I would say one of the holiest moments I've had in church and experience was in a church which was just like what I've just explained in a church. It was called the Asian Calvary Church. It's a church that met in the church I was at in West Bromwich in the afternoon service, and I used to occasionally just pop along to the service. And in comparison to what maybe we're used to, for a lot of the service, certainly the first sort of 20, 30 minutes, it felt chaotic because there was so much movement going on, so much noise. And when it came to prayer, in British culture, we like to do our prayers one at a time, one after each other. And then some people have a nice, very holy way of praying. And so we think, oh, I couldn't pray like that. And so some of us will then be nice and silent in our prayers because we don't think our words are good enough to pray because maybe we're not holy enough. Their prayers, they're all praying at the same time. And some people are marching around the room whilst they were praying. It was very big culture shock for me to experience that because it's not something I had experienced before then. And yet, actually, I would say it was a very holy moment, a very holy church. They did a lot of very good things. They were very much seeking after God. They were seeing people come to faith almost every week within their community, doing very good things. I'm sure they had their flaws as well as a church, but I'm just raising them as a point of that culture looked very different to maybe the culture we think of when we think of holiness. When we think of holiness, we might think like the people of Israel did at the start. They were, it says, they were day after day seeking God out. They seemed eager to know his ways. as if they were a nation that does what is right. They were fasting. We see they were fasting, doing their religious fasting. And yet, despite all of this, we're told actually they were not doing the kind of fast God had called for. They were not really living in the way of holiness as they were meant to. That is what their criticism is of them, because of their attitude, because of their culture. And what I think is a very true thing today in Christian circles, and again, as I've been following this a lot on some sort of social media conversations, is we think we've made it that holiness is the things that we dress things up as. We think holiness is almost, it's the dressing up of the things. So that makes something holy, rather than actually holiness is the culture that's within our own hearts. If we want to be holy, it's not about like making this a nice silent space. It's not about making this a church a particular way that we think is holy. Because there's no use us coming to church on a Sunday, ticking the boxes of holiness, we've had our nice holy hour, and then go home and that's it. Holiness isn't about what we dress things up as. Holiness is about a way of life, a way of being. It's about really what our vision is. It's about seeking God, serving others, shining brightly, but that being in our hearts, not the activities we do, but being a way of being church, or being a way of being Christian. And so holiness, it's a big part of our culture, and I think actually in many ways we get it wrong because we think of it as a sort of a dressing up rather than a heart thing. Because the reality is we could be in a sort of visual way, we could be much more holy, we could be far more devout in our fasting, we could be far more devout in sitting still and having a very sort of magisterial looking service. We could be a nice quiet church with sort of, I guess, no discipline problems, but if that's the reality of our church, there's a great Martin Lloyd-Jones quote which is saying there's no discipline problems in a graveyard. Well, a graveyard isn't exactly a living, thriving place, is it? But actually, holiness can be very much in the messiness of life. It can be very much what is there. The holiness being called to in Israel in our passage in Isaiah 58. They're being told to loose the chains of injustice, untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe him, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. That was the culture they were called to. And actually, if you've ever been involved in ministries which are involved in doing these things, they are some of the messiest ministries you are ever going to get involved in. It's not a nice linear pattern to get from the place of breaking the yokes of injustice to this nice place of justice. If you ever work with people who maybe struggle with addiction, it's not going to be a nice journey of, you're an alcoholic. Okay, I'll put my arm around you. We're going to take that drink off you. Off you go. We're going to have this nice, easy life now. That's just not how it works. You live alongside them. You work with them. You have to support them. It takes a lot of your time. It takes a lot of effort. And they're not going to go on this nice linear projection on the way through to maybe a life of holiness, as you might want to call it. They're going to go up and be like, they're really breaking through. And then the next week you're going to come back and it's just like, oh no. They've fallen down again. But if we're just thinking, oh well then, that's holiness done, that's it, you're out. You're not going to ever see that person break the chains that they're stuck in. Actually, it's a long, bumpy, up and down journey. And that's what they're being called to here. There was a bit of a national thing with Israel, obviously, where it's saying your national culture should be this. But the reality is, if you're doing these things, it's going to look messy. It's going to be hard. You're going to get frustrated with those people you are dealing with. Because that's the life when people are in those positions, where people are bound up by the chains of injustice, when people are going hungry and haven't got enough. Actually, things are messy. Their life is messy. we might feel our lives are nice and ordered, and some of that is a blessing of Christ, and that's a wonderful thing, and we're to share that with them. But if we're just expecting them to be just Christian, just like that, living what we believe is a holy life, then we are very much mistaken. And actually, some of those Christians who are people from those situations, we can so often look at them and frown upon them as well, because we're thinking, oh, you're having this struggle, oh, you're living like that. Some of them are sometimes the more vocal people who create a bit of chaos in churches and a bit more direct speaking, and we can frown upon them with that. They may have some funny views. We may frown upon them for that. But actually, in the eyes of God, they may be far more holy than you are. It's just they're coming from a very different place in their journey with God. They may be coming from a very different place. And God's got, there may be that ministry to do. But they may be far more holy despite the messiness that you may see in them and thinking, we don't have that messiness. Because it's a thing of their heart. They may be striving every day to walk in the way of Christ. But the things of this world maybe keep coming at them, keep pulling them down, keep giving them struggles. That doesn't make them less holy. It just means that life is more tough for them than it may be for you. And so, what I'm trying to get at here is actually a big part of our vision, a big part of living out the way of God, to be the people who are sort of fasting in the way God has called us to fast. It's about culture, it's about heart. It's about being willing to sort of get a bit messy, to deal with the messiness of this world. It's about not just creating this nice insular place which has the feeling of being holy that you can just do, on a Sunday every week. But actually it's about going out, living out in this world that God has called us to live out. That's what we are called to be as church. You're told to go into the nations and to teach Jesus Christ, to make disciples. And make disciples who are then going to teach others about Jesus and making disciples. It's going to be a much messier thing than what we may like it to be. But that doesn't make what we're doing unholy. Actually, holiness is God. It's given by God. It's God at work. We have a good news in Jesus Christ, and holiness comes through him. He died on the cross so that you may be saved. He died on the cross, lived a perfect life so that you may be cleansed from all sin and live a holy life. But he says that you're going to do that with the help of the Holy Spirit. So we need to be walking each day with God, walking each day, seeking after him, seeking after his way, seeking after his heart, not because we ourselves think we need to be this super holy person because that's what ticks the boxes, but because we want to love God. And if we love God, we're going to strive after his heart, and by striving after his heart, we're going to love our neighbour. If we're wanting to seek God, to celebrate the birth of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, if we're wanting to be the people who live out the life of Jesus, be clothed in him, then it's got to very much be a cultural shift in our hearts. It's going to look messy. It's going to be difficult. And I guess part of the question is, are you ready for that challenge? Are you ready for the messiness of the world? Or are you wanting to just have a nice, cozy place for yourself? If it's a nice, cozy place for yourself, then you're going to find actually a life of holiness is going to be difficult. You're going to find the nearness of God difficult. You may be asking the same questions that the people of Israel were asking. You'd be like, why have we fasted and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? Well, maybe actually if we're living out a life of holiness, living out a life where our culture is to seek God, serve others and shine brightly, when that's our culture, then we start to see God at work around us. And that's not to say you haven't got that heart. Sometimes I know our journey, again, our own journey is going to be messy. It's not going to be a linear thing of we're going to, oh yes, we want this culture, we're going to do this each day and we're going to suddenly be better and better, we're going to have this perfect culture at the end of it. Actually, we're going to have some days, some moments where we are living out this culture. We're just going to find ourselves in a moment, maybe in co-op, where the staff, we're suddenly talking to the staff and we're just able to love them in that moment. But then the next day you might go back to the co-op and you're just like, actually, I really don't want to have a conversation here. I just want to get on with my life and hurry on. That's going to happen. We're human. Again, that's why we have confession every week, because we know we're going to stumble and fall short of the culture God calls us to. But let us be a church which strives to be living out the culture of God. Not trying to dress up church as something holy, but actually that we are going to be holy. Be people who live a life for God. To be people who have a heart of love, just as God has a heart of love. To be people who praise the name of Jesus, even when everything goes wrong. And we are be able to sit there, stand there, go out there, wherever it's going wrong, and be able to praise Jesus. You know, if this morning, in a moment, all our technology failed, would we still be able to stay here and be like, yes, I can worship God anyway? If everything went wrong in the next few minutes, I don't know what could go wrong. I'm not going to anticipate various options that could go wrong. But if something went horribly wrong and was a horrible distraction for you, will you be able to be here and actually be like, actually, my eyes are fixed upon Jesus. I'm going to worship him anyway. And maybe as a person who causes it to go wrong, are you going to be able to be here and be like, actually, my eyes are fixed upon Jesus. I'm not going to get angry at you. I'm going to love you. Whatever's going on that's causing this problem, you know, maybe you can see what it is, see a way to help. I'm going to go and help you. Or maybe it's just I'm going to pray for you in this moment. I'm going to keep my eyes fixed upon Jesus and I'm going to love you rather than trying to get into fisticuffs with you because you've ruined my holy moment. Because actually holiness is more than just that little moment. Say it's the heart of it all. It's worshipping Jesus, having our eyes fixed upon him. So let us today and this year be working on this as we beyond this year as well. Let us be working on the culture that's in our hearts. Let us be people who love God, seek him out, worship him. And let us be trying to do the small and organic things of sharing faith and letting faith be our guide in sort of how we live. Because Jesus is good and we want to walk in his ways. Amen.